2011 was a massive year for gaming. This was the year of Batman Arkham City, Portal 2, Dark Souls, Battlefield 3, Witcher 2, Dead Space 2, and of course, the massively legendary Elder Scrolls V. Sadly, there's a game that's missing from this Hall of Fame, however, a highly anticipated open-world RPG that was building up to be one of the biggest releases of the year, but ended up failing miserably, not just because it launched in the shadow of Skyrim, but also because of technical shortcomings, questionable design decisions, and overall lack of polish. That game was Dead Island.
Things that go bump in the night.
What the? Jesus!
Me?
Jerk.
Sam B. Okay. Shrunken head, broken legs, body parts on the concrete. Cut 'em up, butcher style gators in the swamp. Red light, leave 'em dead, running like a track meet. Scared of nobody. What
You know who I am. Give any idea who you're fucking talking to. Or maybe you saw me in the play.
Dead Island is forever going to be one of those games that you can't really decide if you love or hate. It's a massively flawed game in almost every way, but to this day, it still manages to deliver a certain experience that I haven't been able to get from other similar games. It was released way too close to Skyrim back in 2011, and apparently lots of people thought it was going to be similar in scope and scale. Needless to say, the disappointment was immeasurable. The early trailers for Dead Island promised a realistic setting and a dramatic story that was going to immerse you in a bleak, apocalyptic world full of complex characters and emotional stories. But what players got was a little bit more... Let's just say the final product was a lot less ambitious than people expected, and it was also infested with all sorts of bugs, glitches, and performance issues. But despite all that, I still have some good memories of Dead Island, memories that recently led me to purchase the definitive edition of the game so that I could replay the whole thing and finally answer the decade-old question, is Dead Island actually a good game? You start the game by selecting one of the 4 playable characters, each of them with their own specialty and skill trees that match their playstyle. You have Sam B, who's a blunt weapons guy, Xian Mei, who is very fast and lethal with bladed weapons, Logan, who's a more balanced character that specializes in throwing weapons, and Purna, who has some support abilities and is optimized towards firearms. Dead Island is a very co-op forward game, and it's clear that the game is intended to be played with other people. During cutscenes, all the characters will be seen working together as a group, and NPCs will rarely talk to the player as a singular person. However, the game is perfectly playable in single player, and I've actually never played it in any other way. After a long night of apocalyptic drinking, your selected character wakes up in a hotel that seems to have been evacuated in a hurry. There's abandoned luggage everywhere, empty rooms, blood trails, and dead bodies. You get to explore a couple of rooms and learn how to loot random junk from containers, but eventually you turn a wrong corner and end up face to face with the hordes of the undead. A short chase ends with your character being knocked out by a zombie, and the next thing you know, you've been rescued by a nearby group of survivors who have barricaded themselves in a hut on the beach. Some of the survivors are ready to bash your head in, since there's absolutely no way you didn't get infected during your hotel escape, but it appears that you have some sort of natural immunity to the zombie infection. This makes you the perfect errand boy. You will soon be running all sorts of quests for these survivors, bringing in supplies, rescuing missing people, returning lost trinkets, and generally trying to help people out. The entire first act of the game is set in this beautiful beach resort area where the coastal scenery of that island really shines, even though the graphics aren't really the most technically impressive. The vibrant combination of the green foliage, the bright blue ocean, and the white beaches is just beautiful. You get to explore the beach, the pool areas with all the bungalows, the bars, and even the outskirts of the hotel you've just escaped from. These areas of the game look amazing and are very fun to explore, and the environmental storytelling is also very strong when you can see all the luggage and the objects that people left behind in a hurry, the abandoned cars, the half-eaten bodies of people who were killed in their sleep, and the pools tinted with blood. The atmosphere across the whole game is also very good, thanks to great use of sound cues, lighting, and even silence when you explore some of the more creepy areas. The first act of that island makes a very good impression. Unfortunately, it's the honeymoon phase before you're forced to come to terms with the game's biggest flaws. But before I start digging into the negatives, let's take a look at what that island does well. I personally believe that the melee combat in this game is insanely underrated. It's one of the main components of that island, and if it wasn't for how brutal and satisfying the combat is, my opinion on this game would be a lot different. The detailed gore and dismemberment effects make combat feel extremely responsive, and being able to cut off individual zombie limbs or break arms and legs is not just cosmetic but actually can be used strategically, since zombies with damaged limbs are a lot less dangerous, and this can be used to handicap some of the special infected you'll encounter throughout the game, making these fights easier. Also, I love how all the different melee weapons feel so different from each other when you handle them in combat, regardless of their stats. Depending on their size, weight, or damage type, weapons will behave completely differently, with long blades being able to cut off limbs more easily, small knives allowing faster strikes, and larger blunt weapons being better at knocking down enemies. On top of that, you can also throw your weapons as a way to deal big damage from a distance, at the expense of having to get them back later when the fight is over. And if you find yourself in a sticky situation, each character has their own ultimate ability called Fury Mode, which makes you temporarily stronger in some way, allowing you to survive tougher fights and easily take out loads of enemies in the blink of an eye. What also adds greatly to the combat is the fact that you can still be easily overwhelmed by 3 or 4 zombies, especially in the later areas of the game. There's a certain level of challenge and tension during combat, and there will be times where you aggro one too many zombies and your best bet is to just run away. In my opinion, there can never be too much praise for the combat in that island. I will often find myself going out of my way to attack random groups of zombies that were just minding their own business out in the distance, just because the melee action in that island is simply that good. Unfortunately, the combat is pretty much the only thing that will keep you going in that island. Aside from maybe being sometimes intrigued by the faint plot or wanting to explore some of the more interesting locations, that island has a big problem when it comes to its secondary mechanics and side content, which it's going to make a lot of people abandon the game out of boredom, frustration, or just lack of variety. One big example of this is in the RPG elements. You killed some zombies, you picked up some weapons, and now you have skill points to distribute and an inventory to manage. Sadly, the role-playing elements of that island are severely underdeveloped. Each character has their own variation of the 3 skill trees, where you can spend points on improving your Fury Mode, your combat abilities, or your survival skills. However, the skill progression is very linear, leaving basically no room for any sort of creativity or build crafting. Every new skill you unlock usually feels more like a generic passive upgrade rather than a new and exciting ability that opens up new possibilities in your playstyle. The only choice you really have is which tree am I going to put my points into this time, and it barely matters. You can't even respec your points in case you make a mistake or decide to try a different combination of skills, which really goes to show how lackluster the skill system is. The same goes for the crafting system. Unfortunately, you're just looking at lists of crafting components, looking at a list of craftable weapon upgrades, and clicking whatever you want to craft. there's absolutely zero depth. Even though attaching a spinning buzzsaw to a baseball bat or crafting a flaming machete is really cool, the actual process is insanely mundane, and you're just clicking names and numbers on the spreadsheet. Speaking of spreadsheets, Dead Island also has one of the worst inventory systems I've ever seen, with absolutely no ability to sort or organize items, and it has a super clunky weapon comparison system. Whenever it was time to take a break, sell gear, update my equipment, I was always completely flabbergasted by how you can't order gear by rarity or by DPS or by sell value, nothing. It's completely unacceptable. You just have to deal with this pile of items that just cannot be organized in any way. The only saving grace of this catastrophe is that there's also a certain lack of complexity to the loot and gear system, to the point that organizing your stuff also doesn't even matter that much. As long as your weapon level and stats match the enemies you're currently fighting, you're good. Looting is also reduced to just spamming F on whatever containers you find lying around, and all the crafting components in those containers just get vacuumed right into your inventory. Sometimes you do find a super rare weapon in a chest and there's a small moment of surprise and satisfaction. But overall, items aren't interesting. Crafting components are a dime a dozen, and you never really feel an impulse to go out of your way to find missing components for any specific recipe. It's a major issue of nothing really matters that much because the depth and complexity just isn't there. Dead Island definitely has the spotlight on the action and exploration elements more than on the skill trees, crafting, and really anything else. Driving cars feels slippery and unresponsive. The quests are starting to feel a bit too repetitive by the end of Act 1. You pick up your first firearm and it barely does any damage to anything. As you make your way into Act 2, you start to notice all these flaws and you realize... Wait, where's the story? Even now, as I write this script, having finished the game just a couple of hours ago, I still had to go to a wiki page to refresh my memory on what happened in Dead Island. And I actually ended up learning more about the plot of the game by reading the wiki than by actually playing the game. And it's not like the game doesn't do a decent job of telling a story. Sure, the dialogue and voice acting are a bit weak, the cutscenes are low budget to say the least, and the overall plot is a bit derivative. But I was still intrigued to some extent, especially later on in the game when you start learning about the possible origin of the zombie outbreak and how you may be able to escape the island with the help of some mysterious characters. The problem with Dead Island's storytelling is that the main plotline of the game just gets constantly buried under lots and lots of side quests that contribute absolutely nothing to the main story. Countless characters are introduced and then dropped moments later, and most of the tasks that these characters give you are so random and disconnected from the main plot that whenever you come back to the main quest, it gives you this massive story whiplash. The quest design is just so bad, and it results in such a bizarre pacing that it completely handicaps the storytelling. But anyway, I guess Dead Island isn't the game you play for the story. It's a game you play for the warm beaches, the tiki bars, and the tropical summer vibes. And so, in your search for supplies and radios or something, you're led into the city of Moresby, where it's now your job to help a group of survivors who are holding out in the church. This act is where most people will abandon the game. Not only is the scenery so much less impressive than in Act 1, but it's at this point that you realize, yes, the quest design in this game is absolute trash. There's only so many times you can send me to go find 2 cans of food halfway across the map before it stops feeling important. Every quest in Dead Island is a generic fetch quest, and you just have to accept that. However, there are some new and interesting things to experience in this part of town. There are much larger crowds of zombies in the streets of Moresby than there were in the resort, but this time around you can climb onto the rooftops and jump from roof to roof in order to avoid the hordes below. This is especially useful if you're trying to cross the quarantine zone, which is this large walled off area in the middle of the city where every zombie instantly aggroes on you for as long as you stay in the area. Quarantine zombies are super fast and aggressive, and they will respawn indefinitely until you leave, making the quarantine area extremely dangerous. Another novelty you'll find in the city of Moresby are human enemies carrying guns. Or at least you can hope they're carrying guns, because if you see them with melee weapons, it's time to panic a little bit, because humans don't stagger or limp around like the zombies do when you attack them. Melee humans will rush you and destroy you in like 2 seconds. On the other hand, humans with guns are absolute idiots that can't aim and can be easily taken down with a single headshot for pretty much the whole game. This is how they behave, and they're so easy to deal with, it's insane. Along with a couple other new types of special infected, these new enemy types add some welcome variation to the combat. However, now that you're using guns more often to fight humans, you'll realize very quickly how guns suck in that island. They pretty much only deal considerable damage against humans and are mostly useless against zombies for no apparent reason. Guns also come with an annoying aim assist that you can't disable anywhere in the options menus, and they feel super clunky to aim and fire, like their animations are just off in some way. That island was definitely designed with melee combat in mind. In Act 2, you'll also end up in the obligatory sewer level for some reason, which acts more like a transition area between some secondary locations like the police station and the town hall. This is really the lowest point of the game. Really, who thought it was a good idea to go from this to this? But anyway, eventually you find your way into the supermarket where you manage to take back some supplies from a gang of criminals, and you bring those supplies back to the people of the resort. At this point, you manage to contact this shady military guy who claims to be stuck on a nearby prison island, and he may be able to get you off the island if you can figure out how to bring him a vaccine for his infected wife. However, you can only reach this prison location with the help of a smuggler who is somewhere in the deep jungle, and so you make your way to Act 3. If you've managed to endure the boredom and disappointment of Act 2, you'll be somewhat rewarded in Act 3. The lush tropical environment is back, bringing back good memories of Act 1, and it seems like the story is about to get a lot more interesting. After you do some favors for the locals and help fight some gangs, your new friends point you in the direction of a secret jungle lab that may be the origin of this zombie outbreak. You drive over to these labs and start uncovering the truth. It seems like a shady pharmaceutical corporation decided to set up this secret lab in a remote location so that they could carry out some controversial drug tests away from activists and the media. Eventually, the researchers end up coming into contact with a native tribe whose people seem to exhibit signs of Kuru, a prion disease that actually exists in real life and can be contracted by committing cannibalism. The researchers then begin to investigate the disease and try to find a cure, but something causes the disease to mutate unexpectedly, and so the zombie outbreak begins. At this point in the game, you're running around doing all sorts of errands for the scientists so that they may be able to produce a vaccine. There are also a bunch of other random side quests that come up, but for my sanity, I slowly started ignoring them. Because Dead Island starts getting really proud of how many areas you've unlocked, and you start getting side quests that send you backtracking all the way across multiple areas that you've already visited just for some extra XP and mediocre weapons. No thanks. The main quest takes you on a small journey to recover samples from the natives, which gets you some new friends and also some new enemies. But when you return to the lab, it's been overrun with zombies. Thankfully, the scientists managed to develop a cure before they perished, so you take the vaccine and head for the prison island where this guy called Ryder White desperately awaits your arrival so that he can cure his wife. By this point, you're probably feeling a little bit burned out of playing Dead Island. The quests are super repetitive, there's no complexity to the RPG elements, exploration is fun, but the whole game is starting to kinda outstay its welcome. The only thing that's really fun is the combat. But if you want to finish the game, there's still at least a couple more hours of messing around in the prison, or maybe just 1 hour if you skip the cutscenes and the side quests.
Look for me and block, and for the love of God, if you can't, the prisoners don't bloody trust them. I'm responsible for a lot of them being here, so if you bring them to me, they'll kill me, and then you.
The last chapter of the game is entirely set inside this prison. It's a super linear area that doesn't encourage much exploration, and doing side quests in the prison feels incredibly pointless since you can tell the game is about to end. So I just went straight for the finish line, which sadly consists of doing a bunch of fetch quests for this hassle. Go to the solitary and free my friend. Okay. Go to the armory and get me guns. Fine. Go to the kitchen so my boys can eat. Oh my god. The final moments of Dead Island are very anticlimactic. All but one of these prison characters are actually relevant to the story, and it just feels like the game is unnecessarily padding itself out when it should have rolled the credits about 3 hours ago. Everything finally comes to an end when you come face to face with your voice on the radio, Ryder White. The guy presents himself as a major antagonist that we've been wrestling with for the whole game, but honestly as a player I felt like he was a nobody. He betrays your group and steals the vaccine for himself, but one of your party members taunts him saying his wife has already turned into a zombie, so he can't save her. The girl releases the wife, who bites Ryder, forcing him to use the vaccine on himself. Ryder kills Jin in what's supposed to be an emotional character death moment, which doesn't really land. Ryder is forced to use the vaccine on himself, revealing that the vaccine was actually no good, turning Ryder into a large rampaging beast that serves as our final boss. I ended up killing him off screen by stacking some elemental effects on him, which was kind of funny. With Ryder dead, your squad gets on a helicopter and flies off into the sunset with the help of a mysterious prisoner named Kevin, who totally is not going to be relevant for the second game, which I'm not going to touch for at least the next couple of months, because I've had my share of Dead Island for now. And as we finally arrive at the end of this long review, you may be remembering how in the beginning of the video I said that I had good memories of playing Dead Island. But the review has been such a mixed bag. For everything that works, there's 2 or 3 things that don't. The game has terrible quest design, weak characters, weak voice acting, a bizarre story pacing, and underdeveloped RPG elements. All of these things together result in a game that isn't easy to like, or easy to recommend to everybody. But still, I find Dead Island strangely endearing in many ways. It has some gorgeous scenery, fantastic melee combat, a great atmosphere, and it has some creepy horror sequences and some tense moments when it really does feel like a great survival game. As a whole package, Dead Island actually achieves something greater than the sum of its parts, and as I've already said, there are qualities in Dead Island that I have not been able to experience in any other game. Ultimately, Dead Island isn't the groundbreaking AAA experience that many people were expecting in 2011. You gotta take it with a fair amount of salt. But despite its shortcomings, it has managed to climb its way out of the dark pits of mixed reviews. It actually ended up becoming a commercial success over time, and it's still considered by many to be a cult classic zombie game. I would say pick it up on sale if you have some spare change. Dead Island Definitive Edition goes for cheap these days. Maybe you too will find in Dead Island that special vibe that I am talking about. And for today, that's about it. Guys, don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave a comment down below and tell me what's your experience with Dead Island. Did you enjoy the game, or am I just being super nostalgic? I hope you enjoyed this longer style of review. It took a long while to record all the footage, write the script, and put the review together, and now my voice is giving out. I'm still trying to figure out what kind of content works best for me and for YouTube right now, so here you have it, a bit more of a long form video. Let's see if it sticks. Leave a comment, share the video with your friends, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.